So in addition to the cringe, by the way, of the former U.S. presidents and their spouses ignoring Donald Trump at George H.W. Bush's funeral, I want to devote just like a couple minutes to Trump sleeping at George H.W. Bush's funeral. When Trump plays golf all the time, it's not embarrassing. But when he's golfing, he's not doing policy. That's a good thing, because when he does policy, he wrecks the country. Maybe we should be glad, as we show you what this looked like, that Donald Trump was sleeping during the funeral of George H.W. Bush, because when he's sleeping, he's not saying embarrassing things or doing embarrassing things. Maybe that's the upside to all of this. But yes, Donald Trump appearing to sleep through the funeral, which is embarrassing, but at least he's not insulting anybody. But there is something serious here related to Trump that I want to discuss that sort of came to my mind in watching his behavior and seeing how he was treated at George H.W. Bush's funeral, which is that Trump was de facto rebuked at the funeral, as he should be. His name wasn't mentioned once by anybody, period, even though he's the current president of the United States. We know Trump hates this. Trump wants recognition. Everything that Trump said, everything that was said, rather, by George W. Bush during his eulogy indicated that the Trump doctrine, the Trump milieu, is the exact opposite of what George H.W. Bush sort of worked to build. All of the compliments about George H.W. Bush implicitly rebuked Trump. And Dana Milbank had a really good explainer about this in the Washington Post. 1,000 points of light kept being mentioned as a catchphrase of George H.W. Bush. Trump made fun of it. And at the funeral, it was mentioned time and again as something positive that George H.W. Bush had said. George W. Bush mentioned it during his eulogy. He also mentioned that when George H.W. Bush won, he shared credit. And when George H.W. Bush lost, he took responsibility. He shouldered the blame. That's the exact opposite of Trump. Now, I don't know if Trump is clever or intelligent enough to realize that, but these are de facto rebukes of Donald Trump. George W. Bush talked about George H.W. Bush's relationship with Bill Clinton and how it was sort of a brotherhood that developed. That's not the way things are developing for Donald Trump with former presidents. Senator Alan Simpson spoke, former senator, and pointed out that George H.W. Bush never hated anyone. That is not something that can be said about Donald Trump based on his behavior. Said that he was loyal to the institutions of government, the exact opposite of what we've seen from Donald Trump. Now, I concede that these de facto rebukes of Trump are so over his head, Pat, that I can't imagine Trump even understands them as contrasting elements of George H.W. Bush to him. But to a lot of the people in the audience, it was very clear.
Yeah, he may not understand them. They may go over his head, but he does get annoyed, I think, that he's not getting any recognition from the speakers. And essentially the same thing happened when John McCain passed away a few months back. Now, Donald Trump wasn't invited to that funeral because McCain didn't want him there, but many of the speakers had these sort of tacit critiques of the current administration, and you can tell that it irks Trump, I think especially so because he actually had to sit through it this time.
Yeah, he looked miserable sitting there with his arms crossed and just looking miserable. When he wasn't sleeping, he looked very, very clearly miserable. And one of the most subtle but brilliant instances of trolling Trump that took place during the eulogies yesterday at George H.W. Bush's funeral was when the former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney spoke and pointed out that world leaders knew that when they dealt with George H.W. Bush, they were dealing with a gentleman, they were dealing with a distinguished and brave, genuine leader. That's just about the furthest opposite you can get to between George H.W. Bush and how Donald Trump is seen by leaders around the world. And we see that Trump is a child among adults just from how he's being praised for how he behaved at the funeral. Chelsea Handler tweeted about this brilliantly, where she pointed out Donald Trump is getting praised for his behavior at Bush's funeral. Our president is such an asshole. We have to reward him when he doesn't make a scene at a funeral, which basically says it all. the standards have become so low, the expectation has become so low of Trump, that he was getting praised on cable news the other day because he handled the death of George H.W. Bush appropriately. That shouldn't even rate when you evaluate how a president is doing. That they behave after a former president dies now counts as a point in favor of Trump because his behavior is expected to be so atrocious and ridiculous. Basically says it all. One of today's sponsors is privacy.com/Pakman, which is a free service that I myself use. Really useful in many different ways. Takes just a few seconds to link your debit card to privacy.com. Then you can create virtual credit cards that are linked directly to your bank account, and you use those virtual credit card numbers to buy things online, which protects your actual debit card so that it's not spread all over the internet. And one of the best things about it is how their mobile app and browser extensions for Chrome and Firefox make it really easy to use. Let's say, for example, that I'm signing up for a David Pakman Show membership. In the credit card number field, I already see the privacy.com icon. I just click it, choose which of my virtual credit cards I want to use, and the credit card number, expiration date, and security code are automatically entered. I can put in any zip code I want, and I'm done. And if you try to use my credit card number that you just saw on the screen, it doesn't matter because I've already deleted that virtual card, and that's the beauty of privacy.com. There are a ton of advantages to using a free service like this. For example, you can sign up for as many free trials as you want, then just delete the virtual credit card you used and never worry about getting charged for it. It protects you from getting hacked. It protects you when companies are hacked, which happens all the time. It is all completely free. All you have to do is click the link under this video to get started. And for a limited time, they're giving everyone in our audience $5 towards your first purchase when you sign up using that link.